Gentlemen, do you think that the state can come together and on efficiency and the use of renewable to offset the need to build new power plants and the traditional forms of fuel?
Plant developers build plants based upon their expectation of demand. But our renewable portfolio is now the biggest in the country, and we're making great advances on energy efficiency. It will all come together. We should probably expect that our reserve margins will be plus or minus 12.5%. I think the days of 30% reserve margins like we had in the past are probably over. But we'll see both sides of the equation, demand and supply, balancing each other out.
And that's the magic, is if we can get demand to start responding to price, where you have both sides of the marketplace actually working, now you've got something that's viable, and you'll end up, I can't say that you're going to end up with lower prices than there are today, given the global picture around energy, but you'll end up with a rational price that makes good sense, where businesses can prosper, they can understand what's going on, and you'll have a marketplace that truly works.
Yeah, I think they'll be forced to, with whether it be stockholder pressure, a dollar saved is a dollar earned. They need to continually look at their infrastructure to see if it's either more effective or cheaper to invest in new infrastructure that will reduce their energy cost, or outsource to a provider that can provide the service in a more efficient manner.
It's all about kind of an informed consumer responding to making good decisions around energy, as opposed to just thinking that energy is a given. It's always is what it is, and there's nothing that can be done about it, because there's a huge paradigm shift to be thinking that way.
And I would add one point to that, which is that when we made the transition to a deregulated market, the PUC and the industry started with an uphill battle in terms of educating consumers about their choices among retail provision of electricity. This is somewhat like that, in that I think that the PUC and industry will work collaboratively to educate consumers about their ability to measure and control their demand, and that will begin to have an impact, just as it's had an impact on the growth in retailers who are now exercising their choice in retail selection.
John, that's a great point. You know, we saw almost overnight when we deregulated that the large industrial consumers switched away from their legacy provider to a cheaper provider. They also installed demand response equipment because they realized the value of putting that in. Now we want to empower the average residential customer or the small commercial customer to do the same thing.
But immediately upon deregulation, everything became a flat price, regardless of when that you were using the energy, with the exception of some types of contracts. But the majority of the contracts that we saw were flat price, where there was no incentive in terms of using energy at specific times during the day. So we're slowly, I think the marketplace is going to get away from those things. But until that standard in the marketplace becomes not the norm, I think that we've got some work to do.
Yeah, let me add, I think it's important to remember why we moved away from the regulated world is because there were tremendous cost overruns associated with new plants, 2, 3, 6, 7 times higher than originally planned. And back in the old day, a company could come in and pass through the fuel cost automatically to you. Today, the retail electric providers have to decide where to price their product. How much of the cost of the commodity are they going to absorb themselves, and how much are they going to try to pass through? And that's made really all the difference in the world.
What initiatives are in place to help protect the grid so consumers won't see the rolling blackouts last summer in Dallas?
And to be clear, the rolling blackouts that we had in 2006 were a perfect storm. It was April. It was 25 degrees hotter in Dallas than it had ever been before, and we had several plants trip offline. However, we need to learn from our mistakes by continuing to invest in the grid, continuing to encourage more generation development. One of the things we've enacted at the PUC is another demand response program for large industrial and commercial clients. We call it the Emergency Interruptible Load Service. And we think that that'll give us an additional tool that we can use if we were to get in a situation like that before.
In addition to the commissions program that Barry had mentioned, is that we're also heavily involved in programs that get customers to respond and during periods of peak demand like that, and to where they're basically being paid for the energy that they're not consuming. So I think that what's happening is that recognizing the challenges that we faced last year is that the marketplace, which is what's supposed to happen, is starting to work. Okay, where people are starting to figure out innovative ways to ensure that we don't end up with challenges that none of us want to face.
But what we're trying to protect against is that afternoon in August, or even in April or October, when a confluence of events comes together. We want to make sure we've got those tools that we can put in place quickly.
I think it's obligatory on the user to develop some type of measuring system so that we know when these demands are and how we're going to live by changing those. A good example in our case is the addition of storage tanks, for example. And if you take a look at this from an economic point of view, it may be cheaper for you to invest in more water storage so that during these periods we can shut off the wells and use that. And we're looking at these very types of things. We're also taking a good hard look at standby generation. We've increased our standby generation by doubling it over the last 3 years just because we're afraid of a brownout or a blackout during one of our critical times.
John, do you think demand response will be an effective tool in the state's journey to protect reliability?
You have to have relief built into the system because you can't control all the variables. And so the only place that you can go to get that relief is going to be getting people to reduce consumption during those times. So I don't know that we really have an option at the end of the day to having those programs put together to respond during those periods of extreme need. And so I would view it as not only part of the solution, but a very large part of the solution.
Customers, when empowered with the right tools, like an advanced meter, will curtail their consumption at peak periods as much as 15%. That would make a tremendous difference in meeting that peak demand. Plus, it shaves the price off, the peak off the price, and it gives the customer a better price point than what they ordinarily would have. I think many of John's clients are going to start offering these kind of products because their customers want that ability.
Oh, that's exactly right. That's what we've seen in the market, and I think that it makes commercial sense too from that perspective, because this is not only going to empower consumers, but it's going to allow the market to adjust to the demands of the consumers. And the retailers of electricity in Texas have shown a willingness and ability to meet the demand for certain types of products in the retail electric market.
Well, I'd say that there's going to be another driver overall in it is that the retail electric providers want to provide these types of services and have that kind of a relationship with the end-use customer, because what they have come to the conclusion is if it's just about them selling electrons to a customer, the likelihood of them retaining that customer goes down. Whereas if they're adding added value services into that relationship, is that their likelihood of keeping them is a lot greater. So going back to the whole idea of putting common sense and good economics behind what's driving this behavior is going to end up being getting you to the right answer.
I think it's important to note that we've spent billions of dollars enhancing the reliability of our grid. We're planning on spending billions more to meet the growing demand and to relieve congestion bottlenecks. And these advanced meters that we hope the TDUs will be rolling out soon should give them an insight into the distribution network that they don't have today, and hopefully identify problem areas before they become a problem.
Right. So the whole key is that if we can develop insights into what's happening where the customers can understand and put the control of when they use power into the people that can make those kinds of decisions, and this whole demand response concept continues to evolve, there's going to be a lot of reliability that's going to be able to evolve. And I think that that's going to be a big piece of the overall solution, especially during peak periods.